My dear, your old woman is going to a nursing home because I'm moving in with Catherine, Daryl announced bluntly, his words cutting through the air. His eyes met mine briefly, but there was no warmth, only a hint of challenge. If you don't like it, we can divorce. Catherine, standing beside him, wore a malicious grin that unsettled me. Good manners, I thought bitterly, are fundamental even among close friends, yet some people can't grasp that concept. I couldn't fathom living with someone who couldn't maintain basic courtesy, especially towards family. It was unbearable, seeing how Catherine treated my dear mom with disdain. I knew then that I needed to sever ties with both Daryl and Catherine, who had neglected and disrespected my mother. My name is Elisa, a 32-year-old working wife. Our family had returned to my childhood home 2 years ago after Dad's passing, to care for Mom, who had become withdrawn after losing her beloved partner. Back then, Daryl had been recently laid off, and we were struggling financially. Concerned for Mom's well-being, I proposed that we move in together. Daryl, though hesitant at first, had little choice in the matter. With a demanding professional license and responsibilities that filled my weekdays, my schedule was packed. Mom took charge of the household chores during the week, and I pitched in on weekends. Daryl, however, seemed uninterested in lifting a finger. Despite his ongoing job hunt and evident stress, neither Mom nor I broached the subject. It took him 6 months to secure a job after moving in, but excuses about job stress and overtime fatigue replaced any initiative toward chores. Men aren't known for their attention to detail. Mom would quit with a smile that barely masked her disappointment. Meanwhile, my frustration grew steadily. I work longer hours than you and even weekends. Why won't you help with the chores? I finally confronted Daryl one evening. He grimaced defensively. I'm just not cut out for housework. That's not an excuse, I countered firmly. I wasn't either, but I made an effort to learn. You don't even try. Things are different now, he shrugged, retreating from the conversation. You had time to learn. I'm too busy now. His dismissal hung in the air as he turned away, leaving me to wrestle with the unresolved tension. Mom had been struggling with her knees lately, making it all the more important for us to share the housework. However, Daryl showed no inclination to help from the start. Over time, it became the accepted norm that Daryl would avoid any household chores. A new issue surfaced recently when Daryl started inviting his sister Catherine over on weekends. Catherine, who was 5 years my senior, lacked the maturity and common sense one might expect from an adult. I had never been fond of her due to her poor manners. Upon entering our home, Catherine kept her hat on and carelessly tossed it onto the table. Ignoring Mom, who owned the house, she rudely asked, "Old woman, got any Coke?" "We don't have Coke," Mom replied, visibly taken aback by Catherine's lack of manners. Catherine continued as if speaking to her own parents, "Well, you should go buy some. It's bad manners not to offer anything to guests. Please buy your own." "We didn't expect any guests," I interjected firmly, hoping to finally quiet her down. Despite multiple warnings, Catherine continued her intrusive behavior, opening doors to other rooms and helping herself to dessert from the fridge. Talking to Daryl about it proved futile. "Look, when Catherine comes over, neither Mom nor I can relax," I explained to Daryl one evening. "It's okay occasionally, but every week is too much. If you're both free, why not go out somewhere instead of always coming here? It's becoming a burden on my family. I live with your mother, Dina, out of necessity. You should be grateful and not complain," Daryl retorted defensively. "That's a separate issue," I insisted. "I wish you wouldn't equate Mom with Catherine. Mom is quiet and unassuming, while Catherine's behavior causes us a lot of trouble." "It's not separate," Daryl argued back. "I allowed Dina to live with us, so Catherine's visits should be accepted." Frustrated, I countered, "Mom and Catherine are not the same. Mom deserves respect, unlike Catherine, who is rude to both of us." My words sparked a heated argument with Daryl, who seemed unable to grasp the difference. Daryl had been a quiet, reserved person since our marriage, but his demeanor changed noticeably after losing his previous job. He spoke remorsefully about being laid off due to poor performance, and despite my sympathy, I still expected him to maintain basic manners. However, the issue of Catherine's frequent visits was just the beginning. One day, Catherine showed up at our doorstep with a large bag and towel. "Get ready for me," she announced abruptly, leaving both Mom and me taken aback. Daryl was the only one to greet her warmly, saying, "Catherine, good to see you. Welcome. This is your home from now on." While we did have a spare room that had once been Dad's study, I was reluctant to have Catherine use it. "What's going on is that Catherine is moving in here from today," he declared bluntly. "Neither Mom nor I have been informed of this decision." "Stop nagging," he continued sharply. "I've decided that Catherine's moving in. If you have a problem with that, your old woman is going to a nursing home. If you don't like it, we can divorce." His words rang out, and behind him, Catherine smirked maliciously. I'm so shocked that my body stiffens, rendering me unable to respond. The anger surges within me, especially at the disrespect shown towards my mom. Daryl, undeterred, continued to dictate. "Dina, Catherine will be using your room. You'll have to move to the study," he stated with authority. "What?" Mom's expression mirrored my disbelief. Daryl and Catherine proceeded upstairs. Mom and I trailed behind, only to witness them attempting to rearrange Mom's belongings in her own room. "That's enough," I erupted, unable to contain my frustration. "Fine, let's get divorced. Now please leave." "What? Are you serious?" Daryl looked down at me with a dismissive laugh. Without hesitation, I nodded firmly. "I am serious. I've reached my limit with you and Catherine. Living with her is not an option. If you're suggesting divorce, I'm prepared for it. I'll take care of my mom," I asserted. "You're willing to throw away your life for an old woman with limited years left. You don't understand. Spending the rest of my life with you would be the real waste," Daryl retorted sharply. "You brought up divorce, so let's follow through," I insisted. "Fine. Until I find a new place, Catherine will stay in my room. Why don't you move over to your beloved Dina's room?" Daryl countered, his tone challenging. "That's my plan anyway. Don't come to regret divorcing me later. I've been under stress, always putting your mother first. I won't regret this," I affirmed firmly. Both Daryl and Catherine looked down on me and chuckled, likely anticipating a favorable outcome in the property division during the divorce. Swiftly, I packed my belongings and relocated to Mom's room. Having endured discomfort sharing a room with Daryl for so long, I finally found peace in my new sleeping quarters. Concerned, Mom approached me, asking, "Are you sure about the divorce? You'll be alone now." "Don't worry, Mom. I'm okay with it. You mean more to me than that man," I reassured her earnestly. Mom nodded sadly, though she bore no blame for the situation. Once the divorce was finalized, I planned a vacation for Mom and myself to lift our spirits and start anew. I was determined to ensure her happiness. The divorce proceedings proceeded smoothly, with the property settled and Catherine vacating just a week after moving in. It had been an agonizing week. Catherine had taken over the kitchen, wasting ingredients with her haphazard cooking, which often resulted in inedible dishes being tossed out. She also disrupted the nights with blaring music and even consumed a cake I had purchased from a renowned chef, intended to be shared with Mom. After leaving our home, the two of them moved into a well-located condo. Daryl resumed his work routine while Catherine planned to take on a part-time job. You might expect that to be the end of our connection with them, but it wasn't. Feeling the need to release all my pent-up frustration, I decided to visit my in-laws' house unannounced. My mother-in-law, Posey, was a step up from Catherine, but still someone I didn't particularly like, often making snide remarks about me. Among them, my father-in-law, Oswald, stood out as the most reasonable and decent person in the family. Initially, I hadn't minded Posey or Catherine much because Daryl and Oswald seemed decent. It turned out I had misjudged Daryl. Without calling ahead, I arrived at my in-laws' home and announced through the intercom to Posey, "I've come to say goodbye. We're divorced." Reluctantly, Posey let me in. I entered, still wearing my hat, and opened what I assumed was Posey's room. "What are you doing?" Posey asked, clearly displeased. "Oh, I thought this was the custom in this house, given how Catherine behaved." "How rude," I remarked, brushing off Posey's visible annoyance as I entered the room. Oswald was nowhere to be seen, leaving Posey flustered by my unexpected visit. Assertively, I settled onto the living room sofa and made a request, mirroring Catherine's past behavior. "Could you get me a Coke?" "What? We don't have Coke. Can't you go buy some yourself?" Posey replied sharply. "What's this about? You're here to apologize for the divorce, right? I heard you had an affair, and now you act like this." "An affair? I haven't done anything like that. Show me proof before you make such accusations. Besides, this is how your daughter treated us in our home. Didn't you raise her to act this way? And now you find my behavior rude?" I challenged, watching as Posey paled and fell silent. I don't know anything about Catherine's actions. She's never listened to me, no matter how much I scold her," Posey admitted with a hint of resignation. "So you gave up on trying to teach her, which is why you have such a selfish and self-centered daughter and son." "Daryl is different. He's always been quiet and never caused trouble for anyone," I countered pointedly. "Then why would such a polite person bring his sister into our home without asking and try to evict my mom from her own room?" "The reason we divorced is because Daryl told me if I didn't want to live with Catherine, then we should divorce." "Where did this affair story come from?" I pressed, watching as Posey looked bewildered and stared at the ground in silence. Seeing the futility of further discussion, I stood up. "Please instruct your children not to behave like this in the future. I apologize for my abrupt behavior today," I concluded firmly before taking my leave. Following the incident, my parents-in-law formally approached me to apologize. I insisted, "Please apologize to Mom," prompting Oswald to express sincere regret and even provide compensation for the inconvenience caused. Mom was visibly moved by the gesture. I later heard that Posey had called Daryl and Catherine to their home and scolded them. While Posey had her faults, she seemed to pale in comparison to Catherine's behavior. My reenactment of Catherine's actions must have struck a nerve, prompting Posey to realize that changes were necessary. It was rumored that both parents had given their children a stern talking to, but it appeared that Daryl and Catherine's problems were far from over. Sometime after Mom and I had relocated, Daryl called me unexpectedly. "Hey Elisa, where are you?" "Why do you need to know?" I replied coolly. "Because your house is up for sale." Daryl's frustration was evident in his raised voice. I reiterated my question. "Why do we need to tell you where I am?" "Well, that's..." He hesitated, seemingly grasping the significance of my question. "Because I still love you. I realize how much I missed you after you left. I regret my behavior. I was just putting on a front for Catherine. I truly wanted to cherish you and Dina, but I've always struggled to stand up to Catherine. No matter how much he claims to have changed or apologizes or even professes his love, my heart remains unmoved. There's no forgiving the way he brought Catherine into our home, threatened divorce, and insulted my mom," I asserted firmly. "I don't care how you feel. We're divorced. No amount of apologies or money will make me reconsider," I stated resolutely. "Don't say that. I've realized how much I value you and Dina. I promise it won't happen again. Just give me one more chance," Daryl pleaded desperately. "You're just looking for someone to do the housework, aren't you?" I groaned, feeling vindicated by his admission. I just blurted something out, but it seems I hit the mark. "Besides, I can't believe you're asking to get back together," I added incredulously. "You're unbelievable. Remember how you laughed when we discussed divorce? How you and Catherine looked down on Mom and me? Now the tables have turned," I concluded with a mix of frustration and satisfaction. His attitude changed. "You're getting cocky just because I'm being humble here," Daryl retorted defensively. "Weren't you supposed to be remorseful? Didn't Oswald and Posey teach you anything about consideration and taking responsibility? You should be the one apologizing. I heard you were disrespectful to Mom. You've even lied and blamed Catherine for it. Dad scolded both of us because of your actions," I countered, frustration evident in my tone. His dismissive attitude prompted a laugh from me. "Are you seriously saying you've never faced consequences from your parents? Is this how you act at your age? Some people your age are raising families and navigating life responsibly. Meanwhile, here you are in your 30s, acting like a teenager. This is the life you chose. Stop deflecting blame and start taking accountability," I continued firmly. "You think this is all a joke, don't you? If you can't understand what I'm saying, there's no point in talking to you. Don't contact me again," I stated firmly before ending the call and blocking Daryl's number. Afterward, I continued to receive notifications of missed calls from Daryl, but I had no intention of responding to any of them. I heard through the grapevine that Daryl and Catherine had moved into a condo, but neither of them bothered with any housework, quickly turning their new home into a hoarding mess. Eventually, they were asked to leave by the condo owner due to the bad smell and Catherine's disruptive behavior. In a rush, they hired a cleaning company and things briefly improved. However, their place soon fell back into disarray. It wasn't long before they reached out to me for help. Additionally, Catherine's spending habits were extravagant. She had relied on her boyfriend in the past, but he had broken up with her because of her reckless behavior. I couldn't muster any sympathy for her plight. They're both facing financial struggles now that Catherine relied heavily on Darrow's income and spent recklessly. After settling into my new place, I decided to take a trip with my mom. She seemed melancholic, blaming herself for my divorce. Our trip to Hawaii, however, lifted her spirits, and I saw her smile brightly for the first time in a while. Looking ahead, I'm not making any firm plans. Perhaps I'll remarry someday, but only to someone who values family and has basic manners. Otherwise, I'm content being single. My focus remains on working hard and ensuring my mom is well cared for.
Life has a way of surprising you just when you don't expect it. I'm Ella, and I work as an economist. If you had asked me a few years ago, I would have told you that everything was perfect. A loving husband named Mark, a sweet daughter named Lily, and a comfortable home that belonged to us. But let's not jump ahead. Let me take you back to the beginning, to the days filled with dreams and plans for what lay ahead. It was a calm Sunday afternoon, the kind where the sun lazily peeks through the curtains, and the aroma of fresh bread from Mark's bakery wafts through the air. Mark was in the kitchen, his hands covered in flour, a focused expression on his face that always brought a smile to mine. "Hey, Ella, can you grab the vanilla extract? It's on the top shelf," Mark called out, still engrossed in his mixing bowl. I went to the pantry, reaching for the small bottle. "You could make things easier to reach for me, you know," I teased, handing him the extract. Mark grinned, wiping his hands on his apron. "Where's the fun in that? I like it when you have to stretch," he said. I playfully rolled my eyes. "You're impossible, you know that." "That's why you married me," he quipped, turning back to his dough. Lily, our 6-year-old, lay sprawled on the living room floor, surrounded by her coloring books. She hummed a tune, completely absorbed in her artwork. "Mommy, look." "I'm drawing a picture of our family," she exclaimed, waving me over. "That's fantastic, Lily." Turning to the bakery, I asked Mark, "Have you thought about our conversation on expanding?" My tone was a bit unsure. Mark's expression shifted, a frown appearing on his forehead. "Ella, we've discussed this. The bakery is doing well as it is. Why complicate things? But we could achieve so much more for Lily's future and maybe even get that dream house," I persisted. Mark sighed, running a hand through his hair. "I don't know, Ella. I like the bakery the way it is, small, manageable. I don't want the hassle of a larger place." I felt a hint of frustration but chose not to push it. Okay. I just think we should aim higher, that's all." Mark shrugged, a touch of irritation in his voice. "Maybe. Let's just enjoy today, okay? No more talk about expanding." I nodded, not wanting to spoil the day. "Sure, Mark. Let's savor our Sunday." As the day came to an end, a sense of unease lingered. Mark and I had always been a team, dreaming and planning together. But lately, it felt like we were on different pages, especially concerning ambition and our future. As days passed and turned into weeks, the light-hearted banter between Mark and me lost its spark. The bakery, once a symbol of our shared dreams, became a stagnant reminder of what could have been. I was focused on climbing the corporate ladder, while Mark seemed content with the status quo. The first signs of trouble emerged. One evening, I returned home from a taxing day at work, my mind filled with numbers and projections. Mark lounged in the living room, scrolling through his phone. The bakery had closed early, and he hadn't bothered to pick up Lily from school. My mother had stepped in, as she often did these days. "Mark, you were supposed to pick up Lily today." "I had a meeting, and I couldn't make it," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. Mark didn't look up. "Oh, was that today? I forgot. Sorry." "Forgot, Mark. This is becoming a habit. You need to step up," I expressed, frustration seeping into my tone. Mark finally looked up, annoyance flashing in his eyes. I said, "I'm sorry, Ella." "What more do you want? I'm not the only parent here that's strong." Taking a deep breath, I tried to control my temper. "It's not just about picking up Lily, Mark. It's about us, about our future. Don't you think we should be doing more for her, for us?" Mark shrugged, an indifferent expression on his face. "We're doing fine, Ella. Why are you always pushing for more? Can't you just be happy with what we have?" Sitting down, I felt a mix of anger and sadness. I am happy, Mark, but I also want more for our daughter, for our family. Is that so wrong? Mark abruptly stood up, the chair scraping against the floor. You know what, Ella? I'm tired of this. Every day, the same lecture about wanting more. I'm going to my mom's. With that, he grabbed his keys and left, leaving me alone with my thoughts and a growing sense of dread. This wasn't the first time he had sought refuge with his mother, Susan, during our disagreements. It was becoming his default response, and I was left questioning my place in this marriage. The next day, Susan called, and her tone was far from friendly. Ella, what's this I hear about you and Mark fighting again? You're pushing him too hard. He's happy with his bakery. Why can't you be? Susan's voice was sharp and accusatory. I clenched the phone tighter, trying to remain calm. Susan, I'm just thinking about our future, about Lily's future. Mark and I need to be on the same page. Well, maybe your page is the problem, Ella. You're always wanting more. Mark is a simple man, and you knew that when you married him, Susan retorted. I felt a surge of anger. Simple doesn't mean stagnant, Susan. I'm trying to build a better future for all of us. Susan scoffed. You're just being ungrateful and greedy. Mark is doing his best. The conversation ended shortly after with no resolution in sight. I hung up, feeling more alone than ever. Trouble slammed into us like a freight train, hitting with full force. Mark's Bakery, once the heart of our small community, started losing its charm and customers. Bills piled up, and the once cozy bakery felt more like a sinking ship. I was putting in extra hours at work, trying to keep us afloat, but it felt like bailing water out of a boat with a hole in it. One evening, I found Mark slumped at the kitchen table, a stack of bills in front of him, his face reflecting defeat. Mark, what's going on? I asked, a sinking feeling in my stomach. He looked up, his eyes tired and red. The bakery, Ella. I can't keep it running anymore. We're bleeding money. My heart sank. What are we going to do? We have Lily to think about. Mark ran his hands through his hair, a gesture of frustration I'd become all too familiar with. I don't know, Ella. I really don't. I never thought it would come to this. I sat down beside him, trying to process the news. Maybe it's time to consider other options. You could look for a job, at least until we figure things out. Mark's expression hardened. A job? Work for someone else? I'm a business owner, Ella, not some office drone. I tried to keep my voice calm. Mark, this isn't about pride. It's about our family, about making ends meet. He stood up abruptly, his chair scraping loudly against the floor, and stormed out of the room, leaving me with a pile of unpaid bills and a head full of worries. The next day, I decided to talk to Susan, hoping she might be able to get through to Mark. I dialed her number, my hands shaking slightly. Susan, it's about the bakery. Mark's really struggling, and I think he needs to consider looking for a job, I said, trying to sound diplomatic. A job? My son is not going to work for someone else. He's a business owner, Ella. He's better than that. Susan snapped. I clenched my jaw, trying to keep my frustration in check. Susan, the bakery is closing. We have bills to pay, a daughter to raise. This isn't about being better than anything. It's about survival, Susan scoffed. Survival? You always exaggerate, Ella. Mark will figure it out. He doesn't need to stoop to being an employee. The conversation went nowhere, and I hung up feeling more helpless than ever. Mark's refusal to face reality, combined with Susan's delusional support, was a recipe for disaster. That night, Mark and I sat in silence, the tension thick enough to cut with a knife. I wanted to scream, to shout, to shake some sense into him, but I knew it would be pointless. The closure of the bakery brought more than just financial strain. It tore at the very fabric of our family life. Mark, once a bustling business owner, now spent his days idly lounging around the house. I'd come home exhausted from work, only to find dishes piled in the sink, laundry undone, and Lily left to her own devices. One evening, I arrived home later than usual, my head throbbing from a day filled with meetings. The house was in disarray, and the sight of Mark on the couch, beer in hand, watching TV, was the last straw. "Mark, what the heck? Look at this place. Can't you at least tidy up a bit?" I snapped, my patience wearing thin. Mark looked up, unfazed. "Oh, come on, Ella. I'm not your maid, and I had a rough day." I was flabbergasted. "Rough day doing what, Mark?" "You've been sitting here all day," he shrugged, taking another swig of his beer. "I'm dealing with stuff, okay? It's not easy losing your business." I threw my bag down, frustration boiling over. "And you think it's easy for me, working all day to keep us afloat while you do nothing?" Mark stood up, his face a mask of anger. "I'm not doing nothing, Ella. I'm trying to figure things out." "Figure what out, Mark?" "How to avoid responsibility. We have a daughter, for God's sake," I retorted, my voice rising. He shot back, "Don't you think I know that? I don't need you nagging me every day." The argument escalated with harsh words and accusations flying back and forth. Lily, hearing the commotion, came into the room, her eyes wide and scared. "Mommy, Daddy, please stop yelling," she pleaded, her voice small and shaky. We both fell silent, the anger dissipating as we looked at our daughter. Mark muttered something under his breath and walked out, leaving me to comfort a crying Lily. The days that followed were a blur of silent meals, curt exchanges, and an ever-widening gulf between us. I was struggling to keep it together, juggling work, household chores, and caring for Lily, while Mark seemed to retreat further into his shell. The tension in our house had become a constant, like some unwelcome guest who had overstayed their welcome. But nothing prepared me for what came next. It began with small amounts of cash disappearing from my purse. Initially, I thought it was my own forgetfulness, but then the sums grew larger. One evening, after realizing another missing $50, I confronted Mark. He was in the living room as usual, eyes fixed on the TV. "Mark, have you been taking money from my purse?" I asked, attempting to keep my voice steady. He didn't look at me. "What? No, why would I do that?" I felt a surge of anger. "Because it's missing, Mark, and I know I didn't spend it." Mark finally turned to face me, his expression defensive. "Look, I needed some cash, okay? It's not a big deal." I was incredulous. "Not a big deal? It's stealing, Mark, from your own wife." He stood up, his voice rising. "I don't need a lecture, Ella. I took a bit of cash for beer. It's not like I'm blowing it on something stupid." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "Beer? You're stealing money for beer while I'm working day and night to keep the family together." Mark's face hardened. "Yeah, beer. It's not like I have much else to enjoy these days." I felt a mix of anger and sadness. "That's your excuse? I'm out there busting my back, and you're here drinking away our money." Mark scoffed. "Oh, please, you're always so dramatic. It's just a few bucks." I took a deep breath, trying to calm down. "This isn't just about the money, Mark. It's about trust. How can I trust you if you're stealing from me?" Mark didn't answer, just turned back to the TV, effectively ending the conversation. The next day, I made a decision. I called Susan to talk about the situation. "It's about Mark. He's been taking money from my purse for beer," I said, attempting to keep my emotions in check. Susan laughed, a harsh, grating sound. "Oh, Ella, you're making a mountain out of a molehill. He's just having a tough time right now." I couldn't believe her response. "Susan, he's stealing from me. How can you just brush that off?" Susan's tone was dismissive. "He's your husband, Ella. What's yours is his. Besides, it's just a bit of cash." I felt a flash of anger. "Just a bit of cash. That's not the point, Susan. He's not contributing anything. And now he's taking what little we have left." Susan was unyielding. "Well, I don't see the problem. He needs to unwind. You're being too hard on him." I hung up, realizing that talking to Susan was pointless. She was never going to see things from my perspective. One morning, I woke up to find Mark's side of the bed empty. That wasn't unusual these days, but as hours turned into a full day without a word from him, worry started to set in. I called his phone repeatedly, but it went straight to voicemail. Finally, after a week of silence, I heard the front door open. Mark walked in, looking different. There was an unfamiliar air of confidence about him. He wasn't alone. His mother, Susan, strutted in behind him with a smug look on her face. "Mark, where the heck have you been?" "I've been worried sick," I exclaimed, a mix of relief and anger washing over me. Mark looked at me, a smirk on his lips. "Oh, Ella, always so dramatic. I have news." I was confused. "News? What news?" He pulled out a lottery ticket, waving it in front of me. "This, my dear Ella, is our ticket out. I won, Ella. I won $10 million. My heart skipped a beat. "What? How?" Susan chimed in, her voice dripping with condescension. "He bought a lottery ticket with your credit card. Looks like it was a smart investment after all." I was stunned. "My credit card? You used my credit card without asking?" Mark's smirk grew wider. "Well, I needed something to cheer me up after all the nagging, and look, it paid off." The reality of the situation hit me like a ton of bricks. He had taken my card, bought a lottery ticket, and won. It was almost too much to take in. "But, Mark, that's our money then." "We won," I said, still trying to process the news. Mark's expression turned cold. "No, Ella, I won, and with this money, I'm starting a new life without you." I felt as if the floor had been pulled from under me. "What are you saying?" He was blunt, his words cutting deep. "I'm saying I'm leaving you, Ella. I'm tired of this life, tired of you. I want a fresh start, and now I can afford it." Susan laughed, a cruel sound that made my skin crawl. "Oh, Ella, you really thought you were so smart, didn't you? But you see, you've underestimated my son. He's a winner, and you're just left with nothing." Mark grabbed a suitcase he had apparently packed earlier. "I'm moving in with Mom. You can keep the house and whatever else. I don't need it anymore." Reeling from Mark's departure and his shocking betrayal, I knew I had to act fast. The first thing I did was call a lawyer, Mr. Jacobs, a no-nonsense man with a reputation for being tough and fair. "Mr. Jacobs, my husband won the lottery with a ticket he bought using my credit card. And now he's leaving me and taking everything," I explained, my voice shaking with emotion. Mr. Jacobs listened intently, his voice calm and steady. "All right, Ella, let's meet tomorrow. We'll go over everything, and I'll see what we can do." The next day, I sat in Mr. Jacobs' office, poring over bank statements and the credit card transactions that showed the purchase of a lottery ticket. "Based on this, we have a strong case," Mr. Jacobs said, his eyes scanning the documents. "The ticket was bought with your money, which means you have a claim to the winnings." I felt a glimmer of hope. "So what's our next step?" "We file for a court injunction to freeze the lottery winnings until this is sorted out legally. Then we prepare for a court battle," he replied, his tone determined. The court day arrived faster than I had anticipated. Mark and Susan were there, smug looks on their faces as if they had already won. My heart was pounding as I took my seat, Mr. Jacobs beside me. The judge, a stern-looking woman, called the court to order. Mr. Jacobs presented our case with clear, concise arguments, emphasizing the transaction and my contribution to our family's finances. Mark's lawyer tried to argue that the ticket was a separate entity from our marital assets, but Mr. Jacobs countered effectively, showcasing the joint nature of our finances and Mark's lack of contribution. Then it was time for Mark to take the stand. His lawyer asked, "Mr. Johnson, did you use your wife's credit card to purchase the lottery ticket?" Mark replied with a hint of arrogance in his voice. "Yes, but it was just a stroke of luck. It has nothing to do with her." "And what were your intentions with the winnings?" His lawyer continued. Mark glanced at me before answering, "To start a new life. I was tired of being underappreciated and belittled." I felt a surge of anger, but remained silent. It was my turn to testify. Mr. Jacobs asked me, "Mrs. Johnson, can you tell the court about your financial contributions to your household?" I took a deep breath. I've been the primary breadwinner for the past few years. I paid the bills, took care of our daughter, and even supported Mark's mother financially. The judge listened intently. occasionally jotting down notes. After both sides presented their cases, she called for a recess before making her decision. The burden was excruciating. When summoned back in, the judge scrutinized both of us before announcing her decision. Considering the evidence and the circumstances, I rule that the lottery winnings are a joint marital asset. Therefore, I award 3/4 of the winnings to Mrs. Johnson and 1/4 to Mr. Johnson. Mark's face displayed shock, and Susan's smugness vanished. I released a breath I hadn't realized I'd been holding. It was more than a legal triumph. It was justice. Life post-courtroom drama felt like stepping onto a new path, one brimming with possibilities and fresh challenges. My focus was on Lily, and with the hard-fought winnings, we secured a stable future. Meanwhile, rumors circulated that Mark and Susan had squandered their share on frivolous pursuits and were now left with nothing. One day, while running errands, I crossed paths with Mark. He was a mere shadow of his former self, unkempt, disheveled clothes, and an aura of defeat surrounding him. "Ella, look at what you've done to me. I'm broke and dead, and they're taking the house," he blurted out, his voice tinged with desperation. I looked at him, feeling no sympathy. "Mark, you did this to yourself. You and your mother couldn't handle the money, and now you're paying the price." He scowled, bitterness seeping through his words. "So you're just going to gloat, see me suffer?" I shook my head, my resolve unwavering. "I'm not gloating, Mark. I'm just living my life. You made your choices, and I made mine." He attempted to interject, but I cut him off. "You know, Mark, you and your mother never forgave me for claiming what was rightfully mine. You spent your share without a thought for the future. That's on you." Mark's face contorted with anger, but there was a hint of regret in his eyes. "You could have shared more. You could have." I interrupted him. "I could have what, Mark? Rescued you after you betrayed me? After you and your mother ridiculed me? No, I've moved on." He stood there defeated as I walked away. In that moment, I realized how far I had come. I had faced betrayal and heartache, but I hadn't let it break me. Instead, I built a better life for Lily and me, a life founded on hard work and prudent choices.